And welcome back to the Black Psychologist Podcast. I am one of your humble and gracious hosts here, and for your listening pleasures, your clinician, Dr. Kyle Osborne. And of course, I'm never here by myself. We're here episode 16, and I'm here with my guy, fresh out of the frying pan into the fire. He be the mental health number one supplier, fresher than a piece of paper bearing his name. Got the hottest chick in the game, rocking his chain. That's right, Dr. Jason Coleman. How are you, good brother?
Yo, what's up, my brother? How you feeling, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm happy. It's a short week. You know, just got
Definitely
through.
short week, but
Mhm.
a grinder, nonetheless. But I'm not gonna complain. We employed, man. So
Absolutely. Before we get started, again, always thanking everybody who's listening, the subscribers. We appreciate, this is your first time listening. We appreciate welcome. And if you're a long time listener, we continue to love your support and your feedback. So, like we've talked about and advertised in the last episode, continue to join the conversation. We want to hear back from you. Email us at the Black Psychologist at gmail.com. We want to hear back from you. We want to make this interactive. So, you have any questions about mental health, or you got any questions if you're working in mental health, whatever the case may be. We want to hear from you. We want your feedback. So shoot us a question. We'll bring it up on the episode, answer it, have a discussion about it, and just continue to subscribe and continue to support, listen, and like and watch. So anything else you want to add before we get into it, Doc?
I can't really add much to that. Just, of course, we're thankful for every person that takes the time to listen. Please continue to comment, enjoy the conversation, join the conversation. We're humbled by the support and thankful. So that's about it, man. We get into it.
All right, cool. All right, so let's get this thing started. First and foremost, we're gonna start off in the sports world. So over the past weekend, Naomi Osaka, for those that don't know, she is the number two in the world ranked tennis player, number two, and she's only 23 years old. She's an amazing, amazing athlete and player. She, at the age of 23, she's already won four Grand Slams already. So yeah, she's really moving. However, this past weekend before the French Open started, she informed the tournament officials that the news conferences have adversely impacted her mental health. So I'm gonna read a portion of her statement that she supplied to the public and to the tournament. I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health, and this rings true whenever I see a press conference or partake in one. So she said the decision wasn't meant as a criticism or of the tournament, and she hopes that the considerable amount that she's going to get fined will go towards a mental health charity. So she's making the conscious decision to not partake in the press conferences that happen before the match or after the match. And so she's well aware that she will get fined, and she hopes that the fines or the money that it's going towards will go towards hopefully a mental health charity. So I'm gonna break down the timeline because this is an ongoing situation. All right. So the past weekend, tournament started. She played and she won her first match. And she does the immediate on court post match interview. So like after the match is finished, there's always a reporter or whoever will come up and interview them. Hey, how was the match? What did and immediately following. However, she skipped the post match press conference, which she said she was going to do for skipping that post game or post match conference. She was fined $15,000. Okay. Following that, the heads of the organization of all the Grand Slams, all the Grand Slam tournaments. So that includes the French Open, the Australian Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open. So all of them got together and they released a statement. So they threatened and stated repeated violations will attract tougher sanctions, including a default from this tournament, fines, and future Grand Slam suspensions. So pretty much what they're saying is that if you continue to, forego or skip these post and press game conferences, we're not only going to get fined, but you possibly can get defaulted and suspended from this tournament and ongoing upcoming Grand Slams. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the following day, she decided to withdraw from the tournament, citing her need to focus on self-care and not to be a distraction to other players. So what it appears is that Osaka reached out for help and she was penalized when she expressed her mental health needs. Jay, what's your take on this?
I mean, everybody's been talking about this for the last couple of days, if not the last week. I mean, I think it's just another example, right, of two things, of how little we know about mental health, right, in general, people, and just kind of like how much people are hypocrites, right? How people send mixed messages and speak out of both sides of their mouth, right? It's ironic that this is happening at the tail end of May, right? There's a reason why May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? Because you have organizations, and I mean, again, I love the NBA, I love the NFL, but they send mixed messages, right? Because the PSA about mental health, about depression after somebody hurts themselves, they do that for corporate reasons, to be on the right side of history, but then you have somebody who brings up a legitimate mental health issue, and they basically tried to bully her, right? You had the largest organizations in tennis, not even just this tournament, but I think it was other ones, piling on at first, right? Trying to bully her. I know they reversed their positions now, but you had the older figures in tennis, the older women that were more established in tennis that were saying she needs to woman up. She needs to do it. So you have an overall attitude that we don't take mental health seriously until somebody kills themselves, right? When somebody kills themselves, or they OD, or they're cutting, right? Then everybody wants to run to the rescue. But you have here you have a 23-year-old woman, right, who's telling you she has a history of depression and anxiety. She doesn't have to tell you that. That's the first problem, right? Is that she has to go to the press and talk about her mental health diagnosis. All she should have to say is that she has a mental health issue, right? If she had a medical issue, if it was cancer, if it was a blood disease, if it was a kidney disease, do you think she would have to go to the paper and say, I got diabetes, I can't perform anymore? Hell no.
Nope.
Everybody would be screaming, hip of this, hip of that. But when it comes to mental health, we need to know, right? No, you don't need to know. All you need to know is that there's a mental health issue, right? But what we have here, again, is, and we should expect this at this point, right? They're putting money, over, somebody's emotional functioning, emotional well-being, until they harm themselves or somebody else. Then we're all concerned about it. So again, it's another example of like how little we know, and how words are like useless, right? Because I'm sure tennis, the same way the NBA, NFL has put out tons of PSAs, have donated to charities, right? But when it comes down to them really standing by, what the words say, it falls very hollow, so.
No, you said something really important in there. You used the word bully, right? Because that's essentially what happened, right? Rather than support Osaka or come to like a workable compromise, they fined her, but that wasn't enough. So the tournament leaders all had to get together, right? And then they weren't satisfied with that. So it's like, let's get together. And then they felt the need to put her in her place. Right? It's a situation, say, no, if you don't, go along with us, no, now we're going to find you. And now you're in danger, but not only being suspended from this tournament, now you're in danger of getting suspended from all 3 or all 4 Grand Slams. So, and all it did was the sport only further demonstrated that like these tactics with athletes today, they're ineffective, right? Because nobody wins out of this, right? The end result is her being not playing. It doesn't benefit anybody, right? It's a situation where like these athletes are different, right? It's outdated, and when you handle a situation like this, it's likely to backfire. Like you mentioned, now they're coming out and they're trying to do damage control and trying to spin and try to control the narrative. But no, athletes now have more leverage and they're speaking out about their health situation, right? So it's a situation, like you said, if this was a physical or medical issue, then it'd be different. There will also be more sympathy, right? There would be more attention. It's like, oh, if she were to pulled out because she had a groin injury, or like you said, this was like a medical sickness, it would be treated differently. But because
Right.
of mental health, it was like you said, you had the elders of these different organizations that were like, oh, like you said, she needs to woman up, or we know she's shy, but this isn't the right time for her to do that. We can, she needs to do the same thing that other players are doing. And like she she's demonstrated, you've seen her have a history of being anxious at these press conferences. Like this
Right.
isn't shy. You're totally minimizing her health issue. Like even in 2018, I saw the match, right? Where she played Serena, and how that all came and how she all won, because there was a lot of controversy behind it. But she won the match, right? That was her first Grand Slam. And she was crying. Like she was visibly distraught even after winning, because the crowd was booing. Serena had to come over and console her and support her. Like when you see her in press conferences, she's visibly uncomfortable, right? And she stated it. She said, since 2018, I've struggled with depression and anxiety and everything that comes along with it. And it just totally was minimized. And like you said, the woman up thing from elder states people, right? Other elder tennis players who are supposed to be supporting.
I mean, listen, and Naomi Osaka has taught a lot of people a lesson, right? In terms of reacting to a situation with class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being proactive. This is what she said. She said, I was already feeling vulnerable and anxious, so I thought it was better to exercise self-care and skip the press conference, right?
Right.
Sounds like something that would come out of your mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of advice, right? Definitely would be something that would come out of my mouth to somebody that might have a history with anxiety, right? But again, the problem is, and again, it's an example of ignorance at its finest. This is a 23-year-old woman, right? Piers Morgan, 56-year-old man, calls her narcissistic, arrogant brat with an inflated ego, right? This is the definition of ignorance. The definition, right? So we don't have to rehash. We already know his ignorance on mental health in terms of how his comments on the Meghan Merkel, right? But he calls her
what she threw in there, right?
narcissistic, arrogant, black brat with an inflated ego. She has depression, right? Now, this is the definition of bullying. This is a 56-year-old man. She's a 23-year-old girl or woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he has children, right? But what do you think the advice he would give to one of his children if they felt anxious in a social situation? Do you think he would say, you're a narcissistic, ignorant, arrogant brat with an inflated ego? Or he would say, collect yourself, right? Or skip that and come back when you're ready, right? This is the differences in how people would deal with their own family and how insensitive they could be to an athlete that they've already dehumanized. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's crazy, bro. This is a 56-year-old man. What does he know about mental health? Like, no disrespect. Everybody can have their experience, but his ignorance is on display. She has depression, and he's calling her a narcissistic, arrogant brat with an inflated ego. That's the why we have Mental Health Awareness Month, because of attitudes like that, right? And this is a person that has a microphone that probably reaches hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, right? So again, I wanted to talk about it because it's an example. You have a lot of people that might hear what he says and they're like, oh yeah, she, if she won, she would have took the money, right? So that's how they look at it, but if one of their relatives had depression, the stance would be a lot more softer, So we all, people in general have to educate themselves, and we have to normalize mental health, right? And I will always draw the comparison, when you feel like dismissing somebody's depression or saying it's not real or it's not that bad or this or that, think about, would you say the same thing to somebody with a medical illness that you can't see? All right, nobody's gonna tell somebody with diabetes it's not that bad. Nobody's gonna tell somebody with sickle cell anemia that it's not that bad, right? You can't see it. You know, I know people that struggle with these challenges. It's very bad. You know, so listen, man, we just gotta wake up. But that's an example, right? 56-year-old man bullying a 23-year-old for having depression. It's absurd.
And that's why, like, I feel like this is such a big deal, because like you mentioned, if this were a physical issue or medical issue, the attention would be completely different. However, she's being courageous in this, right? She's understanding that this wave of anxiety is too much for her to manage,
Right.
right? Because she's dealt with this and struggled with this for such a long period of time, right? But she's still been able to manage it, at least to the extent where it's not affecting her performance on the court. But you have to kind of think how anxious she is when she comes off the court, and I have to sit in front of all these different people, and you know, and then it's also the fact that we take into account that she did all of this in front of a whole worldwide audience, right? She came out and said and did it in the right way, in a professional manner, and said, this is the reason why. It wasn't like she was on some, oh, well, I just don't want to talk to you guys, and that's it. No, she provided a reason, which, like you said, she didn't have to.
She shouldn't have.
Right. She shouldn't have to. She shouldn't have to feel obligated, but her also knowing the environment that she plays in, right? Because we know, like, tennis, again, which is what they've demonstrated, how callous they can be regarding health. She felt the need and was open enough to explain, okay, this is why, right? So she's courageous enough to do that. And then also, like you said, she mentions the self-care aspect of it. Like, she took a critical step in saying, this is going to be too much for me. I need to step away, right? One, I'm going to try to reduce it because I know how my experience is in front of cameras and doing these press conferences. It's no good for me. So she's knowing her limitations. Like, I feel like that's so bold, and like the awareness is at such an incredible amount, which is why it's such a big deal, because as opposed to being like, you know what, I'm going to continue to go out and see what happens. And possibly, like you said, I'm going to shoulder, right? Because how many times do people, I know, or just and people in general and our patients and clients, do they say, you know what, I'm going to take on this depression and anxiety in the name of like bravery, right? In the name of trying to be like, manage it with few tools, right? You don't have the tools or necessary, help or resources of trying to get treatment. You just go ahead and do it anyway, right? You go out and you're trying to manage the depression and anxiety anyway, and it becomes overwhelming. So as opposed to her doing that, she's like, you know what? I don't want to be in a situation where this becomes more taxing, and it can contribute to a breakdown, right? It can contribute to, like you said, her harming herself or suicide, right? So she actually did the thing and said, you know what? I'm going to step away to take care of myself. I'm knowing my limitations. I'm going to step away. And yeah, to the outside world, as an Osaka fan or a tennis fan, it sucks not to see her there. However, I'm happy that, she's weighing this emotional fallout compared to, I don't want to experience or endure a more depressive episode or another anxiety episode that's going to do me in. So she's making the right decision. So kudos to her. I'm hoping that as she goes home and she's with her family and her loved ones, she gets the support that she needs. She gets the professional help that she needs, and she takes care of herself, because like, this is big for a 23-year-old woman. Like we were just saying, like, she made a critical and important decision to focus on her health as opposed to continue to go through this.
I agree. But see, this is the thing, right? I think the spotlight should be shined on these sports leagues, right?
Totally.
To walk it the way they talk it, because if I'm a pro athlete and I have a mental health issue, I'm not telling anyone. I would rather lie about a medical issue, right? Why? Because you saw what happened to Paul George, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we talked about it, right?
So again, the NBA didn't necessarily support him in the way that he should have, So these leagues, I think, is one thing to do the PSA, put money behind it, but they have to really have the resources and take this serious, And when you see the fallout, when the response is, okay, we're going to throw you out of the future tournaments, fine you, right? And then you have the pros, okay, the older established players in the sport coming out doing the same thing. it's kind of like a shut up and dribble kind of situation, for lack of a better term.
That's exactly what it is.
And we'll get into this a little bit more in the next article, but you start seeing these trends, with certain types of athletes, and it's troubling. You understand? Mm-hmm. But just in general, in terms of mental health, we got to evaluate the same way as physical health. When a player is out, I know the managers and coaches play these games, but it's usually injured reserve, and that's it, right? And when there's a mental health issue, she should not have to explain or reveal her diagnosis. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? She went through all of the steps. She told them she would talk to them afterwards. She gave them warning. She didn't just not show up.
Exactly.
So this comes back to them and their insensitivity. And we saw the same thing with Kevin Love. We saw the same thing with Paul George. Tyson Fury in boxing. Listen, this permeates all sports because we got this warrior mentality. Okay, and you got a bunch of people, writers in the press box. Not all of them, but half of them who've never even picked up a ball ever and don't know anything about that type of pressure, right? And again, they want to get the story, right? So we talked about this on the last show in terms of the bad behavior, but the part I want to take from it is anything to get the clicks and the views. So they don't care about Naomi Osaka's health. They want her to run out of the press conference crying how they did Serena. That's what they want. They want her to get up out of the press conference and say, I can't take it, right? And then they get to write stories about that and cover that. And they didn't waste their afternoon. That's what they want. They don't care if she would have a whole meltdown or a nervous breakdown in their presence as long as they got to write about it. This is the era we're in. People would love to see you melt down live on camera. They would love to see it right now. Not the people watching us, but you know what I mean in terms of the things that make you go viral. That's one of them. So again, I think we got to give her a lot of credit, but the shine and the spotlight needs to be pointed back on these sports leagues, because they're not walking what they're talking.
And I think that's exactly what this does. The fact that she did, because this was an enormous mystery. And again, it definitely shines and highlights how callous they are in treating this. And like you said, you can do all the PSAs that you want. And however, when it came down to it, you didn't support her with this.
Right.
It's to the point where she stepped away to focus on her own care. And now here you are. So it's exactly what this does. It shines a light. You have a lot of sponsors. You have a lot of people that are like looking at this. Now they're looking at them with the side face. So I hope that this gets escalated. I hope that this, they continue to shine this light on it. So we'll continue to monitor it.
Yep, definitely, bro.
So staying in the sports world, and as we talked about it last week about bad behaviors on social media, but now we're talking about it in the NBA, right? So it's NBA playoff time. You're watching, I'm watching. However, the only thing is that we're not only, watching the games. That's not the only thing getting headlines. Unfortunately, this bad behavior as it pertains to fans has been coming up. And last week and over the weekend, there were 5 NBA venues that banned fans for disruptive behavior during games. So I'm going to give the list of them, right? So the first one was the Washington Wizards are playing the 76ers in Philadelphia, game 2. So Russell Westbrook rolls his ankle during the fourth quarter. So while he's limping down to the locker room, a fan pours popcorn over him, right? Like literally above, like where he's walking into the back area, whole bag of popcorn. It wasn't like it was just one, it was a whole drenched, in popcorn. That same night in New York, the Knicks were playing the Atlanta Hawks, game 2. Fans spit on Hawks guard Trae Young while he's trying to inbound the ball on the sideline. Also the same night in Utah Jazz are playing the Memphis Grizzlies in game 2. Grizzlies guard John Morant, his father and his wife, while they're sitting in the fans watching the game, they're heckled with racist remarks while watching the game in the stands. So, and I quote, this is what a fan said to him: "I'll put a nickel in your back and watch you dance, boy." Another statement that was said was, "Shut the fuck up, bitch." That was to his John Morant's father to his wife. Later, a few days later, Sunday night, game 4 in Brooklyn Nets versus Boston. In Boston, After the game, while going to the locker room, Kyrie Irving, he's walking towards the locker room. Fan throws a filled water bottle at him. Just missed him, right, as he's walking in. In DC that same night, Game 4, again, Philly and the Wizards. Fan tried to run on the court. He had to be apprehended and tackled. So 5 incidents within 4 days of each other. What's your take on this, Doc?
I mean, listen, there's a lot going on here, right? But we're talking about the fans right now. So, listen, why are they so emboldened to do it? Some of the reasons people have been putting out is like, people have been cooped up in their house for the last year. They're disappointed at how the players, some of the teams were playing. Alcohol is involved. These are some of the reasons that, were given. Mm-hmm. Listen, man, I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, we know how it is when, we know how people's behavior and decision-making changes when they're in large groups. Yep. Right? We know that because of the anonymity that comes with that and being able to hide in that crowd. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and in layman's terms, they're just cowards, right?
Let's call it what it is.
Same type of person that'll throw a bottle and go hide behind somebody or push somebody, go hide behind somebody. There's no accountability, right? So all of these people, if they saw Russell Westbrook in an elevator, they would ask him for an autograph, walk by him, or they wouldn't say anything.
I was gonna say they damn sure ain't gonna throw popcorn at him.
Right. So why are they so emboldened? It's simple. Like, there's no personal accountability. And then on a larger scale, it's Candyland. So it's like, okay, the Garden finds me, bans me for life. And then next year when I put on a hat and grow a beard and have my mother buy me a ticket, then are they going to be able to pick me out when I walk through the Garden gates?
Exactly.
No. Right? So a lot of the fines that they're levying, I know there was an arrest, after the public pressure started to mount, but there's no accountability, right? Because they still want the money. They still want the fans' money. You understand? So you have that part. And then there's another part. Like, listen, we've had different conversations about NBA players specifically. You know what I mean? And how it's a difficult relationship when it comes to how fans view them, right? Because we know in general how a lot of fans feel about players voicing their views on anything that doesn't relate to them shooting a basket, right? A lot of fans don't like that. That's where shut up and dribble came from, right? And all I'm going to say is that type of attitude, shut up and dribble, would lead you to believe that it's okay to spit on somebody, right, who you just paid to see, right? That type of attitude would lead you to do that, right? Most people, if they're disappointed in the service they receive at a restaurant, at a rock concert, at a classical concert, they get up and leave, right? So to spit on somebody, to me, requires some form of dehumanizing that person. So that part of the conversation has to be had. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts there. So what did you think?
Definitely dehumanizing, deplorable behavior. Like, there's a big difference between being a passionate fan and booing the away team that comes to town, and then doing something completely dehumanizing, right?
Right.
Like, you can boo, you can talk a little trash, that's cool. But fine line. And this is also entitlement, right? Entitlement where, like you said, you feel like because you paid your money, you can display these type of actions towards a player. And the NBA, unfortunately, there's always been like this double standard, right? You have NBA players that have always been held to a high standard of professionalism. That double standard is when it comes to spectators and their behavior and abuse, right? They're not held to that standard, right? You can't have an NBA player. There was a situation with LeBron earlier in the year where you had a fan that was jawing back and forth with him She's saying all kinds of different things back and forth with him. And if LeBron shows or displays any remote type of cusses at her or any type of unprofessionalism, he's going to get fined. This is going to be a scar on his reputation. He should know better, right? All these other different narratives will start to come out. And like you said, the reporters, everybody else will run away with this. However, you can have all types of things thrown at their direction, right? They can talk about their families. They can have all different type of things. Okay. And it goes beyond they're professional athletes. This comes along with the territory. Okay. It goes way beyond that. Again, fine line between trash talking and booing, and then you want to sit here and you want to start throwing racial slurs, because that's another thing we have to talk about. Like, despite what Danny Ainge says, because he said that while he was living in Boston, he's never experienced any type of or seen or heard of any type of racial thing. I thought that was laughable. I thought that was laughable. Like, come on, bro.
I'm sure nobody called Danny Ainge a racial slur.
Right. But you've been there. Like, you want to sit there and tell me that you stood next to other different opposing black players and they weren't throwing racial slurs at them? Come on now. All right. But we know that the league has had a long history of African-American players like enduring racist taunts, right? We have to look at it where it's like race it plays a card in this, or plays as a factor, because most of the players are black. Most of the fans that you see are white. Right. And so a lot of these, there are clear racial undertones to this type of heckling that we're seeing, right? Because this is where you're saying, you're not saying, black fans or anything throwing these things. You're seeing these phones, like, and totally alcohol plays a part in it also, because it lowers inhibitions. However, there's a clear racial undertone to these actions. And, it's deplorable, man.
Listen, when you were talking about fan abuse, right? And that I had to write something down. I'm like, but yeah, it's fan abuse, but race always plays a factor, right? Because it's certain fans, right? Yeah. What you're talking about, yeah, you'll find that at basketball games. You'll find that if you go to the link in Philly, you'll find that at football games, right? I got a scenario for you. Me and you are at a PGA event, right? We're at a PGA event, golf, or we're at an Adele concert. We're either going to see Adele or we're at a PGA event, right? I throw popcorn on Adele and spit on her, right? And throw a bottle at her. What happens immediately?
I might not even see you again. I'm be honest.
I'm arrested, right?
Immediately.
Now, this is just your idea. We just speculating. But am I arrested and banned? Or do you think I'm going to jail?
Oh, no. You're going to jail.
Right. Yeah. So what we have here, but they will tell NBA players, Russell Westbrook is soft though, right? Right. And they'll tell them to toughen up, right? So people may think I'm being extra, but this is where we get the devaluation of black bodies.
Exactly.
Right? Black life is cheap in America. You could never do that at a PGA event. Never. You would be booked with a mugshot. But you can throw popcorn on Russell Westbrook, right? And we can play games, but we know, for all the law people out, we know that's either assault or battery.
Yes, it is. That's simply what it is, especially spitting on it. That's
playing that game, right? And for anybody who would challenge that, let's switch the environment. Put yourself at the Masters. Put yourself at the Bruce Springsteen concert. And how long would you last doing that? And then where would you end up? Because they're not just gonna put you out, okay, stamp your ticket and say have a good night. You're going to jail. And that's why when you say fans, that's correct. But certain fans, and that I think is the part that makes people angry, right? Because what you saw with LeBron, that would never, they would never let anybody do that to Brooks Koepka at the PGA. Are you crazy?
Nope.
They would never let somebody spend $10,000 to go front row to the Madonna concert and do that to her. They would throw you out and lock you up, right? Well, maybe not for the LeBron thing, but you know what I mean, right? So my point is, and it may seem like it's extra, and it might be, right? But we gotta be extra, right? Because of the simple fact, and we gotta draw those comparisons because of the simple fact that for individuals who aren't aware of the differences in the two environments might just think it's the alcohol. You understand what I'm saying? And it's not just the alcohol.
Yeah, like we said, the alcohol lowers the inhibitions, and no, you're not being extra because bans are not sufficient enough. They're ineffective, like you mentioned. Like you can ban whether the person's a season ticket holder or it's an individual game. No, you can ban someone, and like you said, they can come in the following week. Every security guard or every ticket person, they don't know who that person. They see thousands of people come through a day. There's no way you're going to be able to ban any individual, right? You can't do it. I believe that honestly, like how it was back in the day, and for some of our listeners and watchers that are from the Philly area, and if you're in your mid 30s or 40s, you're familiar with Veteran Stadium. So Veteran Stadium.
That's what I meant. Yeah. That's what I meant.
When at the vet, listen, man, they had a jail. They had a court and they had a jail there. And for fans that got rowdy, that displayed this type of behavior, no, you went to court, you went to jail, you were there, and you received like real judicial punishment and consequences. And I feel like I know the Link used to have that after they destroyed the vet. The Link had it for like a couple years, but they kind of did away with it. But I believe that all stadiums and all venues need to have this form of a judicial system. Like it's an effective deterrent, and you have to start yielding like these consequences with people, because again, when you get in, I don't care if you're drunk or whatever, all the alcohol does, as we've talked about in the past, is just lower the inhibitions, right?
Right.
Like you said, you're with your friends, you're in a group atmosphere. Oh, bro, I'll bet you I do this, I'll do that. No, listen, no, there need to be some serious consequences for this. This is assault. You need to have an assault charge. If you spit on somebody, if you're throwing popcorn, you're throwing a water bottle, no, that's an assault charge. And I believe the players, I don't care what sport it is, they have every right to press charges to the fullest extent.
I mean, and again, I in no way would I ever condone violence, but the only reason why I bring it up is because they would judge the reaction, right?
Exactly.
If that fan was within arm's reach of Russell Westbrook, and he grabbed him after he pushed a popcorn on him and snatched him off, and he fell and hurt himself, he would be suing Russell Westbrook, right?
Hey, listen.
But and the focus would be on Russell Westbrook's reaction and not what he endured before somebody assaulted him with popcorn, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my point. You have to put these things in place because we're creating an environment where it's like the circus, right? Where I can throw stuff at you, I can poke the bear, but the bear can't get out. That's how they're treating it. You know mm-hmm. what I'm saying?
But and I know that the bear sometimes gets out though. You remember the malice,
right?
Right. And, right. And everything was harped on, and I get it. Like you said, we're not promoting violence in any form or fashion. However, you throw this at the wrong person, and a lot of it came down on Ron Artest. It came down on Jermaine O'Neal and Steven Jackson for their actions or how they responded to it. But he was laying there. He was laying at the scorer's table. The bottle and the food came out of nowhere, came from the fans. And like you said, you continue to poke the bear, you're going to poke the wrong bear, you're going to poke the wrong athlete, and someone's going to get hurt. And like you said, to avoid that, we have to be proactive, or the league needs to be proactive, all of these venues, and say like, listen, you do this, not only we're going to ban you, no, you're going to do some time. You're going to have some charges against you.
Right.
So.
Man, I get it, man. I got nothing else to add to that. That's real though.
So we'll see. I'm hoping that this reduces as the playoffs goes on, but like the flurry and the frequency that this has been taking place is disturbing. So but they need to put some things in place to reduce this deplorable behavior. All right, so I'm going from one difficult job as an NBA player to, I think, the most difficult job that you can have is parenting. Right.
Okay.
So I don't care who you are, how many books you read, what your occupation is. Being a parent is tough. It's on the job training. You're going to learn as you go. And not every kid is the same. You could have 3 or 4 kids raised in the same household. Kids are going to be different. So absolutely, parenting is a difficult situation. Something we also have to keep in mind as parents is how, when we're raising and we're communicating with our kids, that make sure that we're doing it in a healthy manner, because we've all seen some situations, whether it be clients or we know people in our personal lives that, we've seen some parenting tactics that very, very questionable and downright unhealthy for the kid, right? We know that it's affecting the kid in the way that some of these parenting tactics are taking place. So we came across an article where we're talking about people being called out for normal parenting tactics and that, or what people assume for such a long period of time have been normal parenting tactics, and they're actually pretty toxic and unhealthy, especially toward the kids. So I'm gonna run down these the list, all right, and we'll run through them real quick and give me your take, all right. So you have a parent that's refusing to apologize when they're wrong. All right. So that means, you don't apologize to your children when you, like, if you're having a discussion or an argument or whatever the case may be, and you're wrong, right, about the situation, whatever you may be arguing about, and the parent refuses to apologize. How you feel about that, Doc? What do you think about that, Jack?
I mean, listen, I think this specifically, I think some of that is cultural, We're not gonna get well, I'm not gonna get into the finger pointing specific cultures, but I know I've experienced this personally. It's like, listen, some parents, the way they was raised, I think this is me speculating, right? I think that they feel like apologizing to their children is kind of showcasing a vulnerability that they don't want ever, right? They want to always remain powerful and in control, right? In my humble opinion is that it's a mistake, right? Because number one, your kids know when you're wrong, right? They're not fools, especially as they get older, and they know your parenting style very well. So indirectly, you teach them to avoid responsibility, you teach them to avoid, responsibility, and, they're not going to be honest either in their interactions in terms of admitting their shortcomings, right? So I think it's one of those things that parents, kind of got to understand that, they're in control and have all the power anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? All the time, right? So it's kind of one of those things where, most parents, they want to have an embarrassment of riches, right? So you want the power, control, and you want to know what's in your kid's diary, right? And you want to know what's their inner thoughts, right? But forgetting that we're kind of doing two things, right? Because of course, good parents have to provide structure to their children and provide a certain type of example, but we also preparing them to be independent at one day, right? So things that we do, they're gonna model. So but that's one thing I see a lot, especially culturally. What do you think?
I think the really quick is that the two things I'm gonna tease out of what you said is embarrassment, right? A lot of parents, the last thing you want to be is wrong in front of your kid, especially if you go big, right? That's the last thing. It's a very difficult pill to swallow. However, it's the modeling part that you asked about, right? That you said, like, you're modeling accountability for your kid. So if you can admit and say, okay, I was wrong in this situation, and again accept it, that's okay, because like you said, you still have the control. Like, just because you're wrong doesn't take away your parental powers. Right. So I think that's the fear and concern, and then the embarrassment factor that, like, listen, like, you were wrong with something, and definitely it does showcase some vulnerability, but you're just wrong about a particular issue or a subject that you're talking about or discussing. It doesn't mean you're wrong about parenting overall. So I think that's also kind of plays into it, is the embarrassment part. But if you're able to acknowledge that you're wrong, it definitely models accountability. All right, next one we got is the comparing them to their siblings. You got the good old, why can't you be more like your brother or your sister? That does nothing for their self-esteem, and it can really, keep them from becoming their own person. What are your thoughts about whenever you've witnessed this, or that you've seen the old, why can't you, the comparison?
I mean, a lot of these issues I've seen less and heard about them through the perspective of the kids, like the teenagers, right? So it's a different perspective, it's a unique perspective, but in terms of the comparison, I'm gonna take a different approach, right? I think when a lot of parents do that, I think they have good intentions, right? Oh, why can't you do your homework like your brother? Or your brother's so focused, he's so smart, blah, blah, blah. But what I don't think like a lot of parents understand is that sometimes, depending on what it is, it has like lifelong implications, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is anybody that has siblings know automatically you compare yourself to your siblings. That's how you measure yourself. Whether you're a young boy and me and my older brother doing push-ups, and I want to see, can I do 4 today, 5 today? He's doing 15. Or he went to Howard, I want to go to Howard. He did. You measure yourself by your siblings, right?
Right.
So there's already that pressure that's already there. You know what I mean? So if you have a parent, and then you have to remember that kids are individuals, so they're gonna have different things that they are good at and deficient in different things that they have challenges with. You don't want to kind of reinforce those deficiencies or that kind of thinking, you know? So the intent, I think, is good intent. But I think it could be, you know, I think it has a bad effect a lot of times.
Yeah, I've seen this take place more often than not out of frustration, where I see a parent is
Okay.
like, you know, well, why, like you said, why can't you get good grades like your brother? Or why can't you do this like your sister? So it's like they're trying to say, hey, I'm frustrated because you're not doing this. But on the other side, like your sibling is able to. So where
Right.
it might be coming as like they may be thinking it's motivational or they're highlighting something. I feel and believe that it has an adverse effect on the person that you're saying you're comparing the kid to, because now that kid depending may look at that as favoritism also, right? Like you're saying, oh well, you're putting one kid on a pedestal, and now here I am. So now you're saying I need to be more like this kid. I need to be such and such. And so, like you said, there's already a compare, you know, that exists between siblings anyway, whether siblings are aware or they're, you know, that is taking place, but that comparison is already there. So if you have a parent that's like, why can't you be like this? That's the adverse effect that I think can have, is that you feel like they're leaning towards this kid, or they love this kid more, or they like all that kind of preferential treatment. So I think the favoritism can come out of that.
I mean,
Um,
that's a great point. That's exactly, you articulated it perfect. That's what I was trying to say in terms of like the lifelong implications. Like you got people 46 years old where you're talking to them about their life, and they're like, yeah, you know, they always love my brother more because he got the good grades. You know what I mean?
yeah, you're right.
That usually doesn't come from your brother standing over you like I'm the smartest, because y'all playing video games, chilling. It usually comes from your parents, or you know, when in-laws come over, how's everybody doing? Oh, he's doing good in school and he's not, like that type of stuff. You know what I mean? So the intent is to motivate, but it doesn't necessarily have that effect all the time.
Exactly. All right, number 3, telling your kids your personal problems, like, your dad is horrible, he didn't even do the dishes, or I hate my marriage. You know, like essentially treating your kids as as a therapist, or like they're your sounding board, right? So, you know, kind of involving them in your personal life about whatever types of issues. Yeah, I always kind of cringe when I hear or see this. This is not a good thing.
I mean, listen, we see this a lot, especially when we're talking about like co-parenting and like divorce kind of cases, right? Um, First, and again, I'm gonna take a different approach. I agree with you. I'm gonna take a different approach because I can understand how certain people and culturally, right, when they go through something bad with their partner, right, the person leave is not the person they thought it was, whatever the case may be. Some people don't want to let those issues outside of the home. You know what I mean? So sometimes they don't even want to call their mother or their brother. So you end up, so your son is 15 or 19 or 13, and you know, or your daughter, and so you that's a sounding board. That's a person that's right there, right? But and I understand. So you want to kind of keep that message in house, and you get a release from talking to them, right? And you know them, right? But like you said, you know, number one, your child isn't your therapist. 2, they can't do anything to help you, you know. And 3, I think again, the point that I think a lot of people miss is that you put that stress on your child, right? So they might not say it to you. Again, kids are not as verbal as adults all the time, or sometimes they internalize things, but you start talking to your son or your daughter about your marriage being in trouble, you know, then they're worried about their stability. They're worried about things you're not even thinking about. Oh, am I going to be able to live here? Am I going to be playing on the same baseball team? Right? And you worried about a release, right? When the appropriate outlet, if you can't find a family member, is to find some therapeutic support, because again, your child is not your therapist, right? So again, the intent, I understand, right? You might want to keep some humiliation, embarrassment, or just not being vulnerable. You want to keep that in-house, but it's not a good thing, man.
I think it could also have a negative influence. Like you said, if it's a co-parenting situation and you have one parent is talking smack about the other parent, it's like that can have an influence depending on how old the kid is about the other parent, right?
Right.
So it's a thing where, like you said, stability and kind of getting those ideas from one parent kind of leads to side taking and other different types of negative influence or perceptions that they may have, which is unfair. So awareness, I think, is key. Like, it's one thing, okay, your kid's in the car, you're having a conversation, but I strongly recommend that parents just have that awareness of like, all right, am I going too deep? Like, if the kids are observant, right? They're going to overhear things. As they get older, they're also going to understand more of the circumstances. However, it is to an extent where that conversation kind of needs to be cut off, right? If it's personal, it's between you and the parent, or it's just about something else that's taking place. It's like, all right, having an awareness, all right, am I divulging too much information? Right? We got to kind of have that awareness, like, all right, let me put the lid on it and kind of reduce, because again, your kid is still your kid. And they don't hear everything.
The piece that's a little controversial that I don't know, I feel like I have to say is that you also have some people that, like, they want to win, right? They want the kid on their side, right? So they want the kid on their side. So having the kid on their side involves slandering mom or dad, right? And that's a whole selfish personal thing. Mm-hmm. That's like, oh, our relationship is over. So instead of putting the co-parenting first, as it should be, because the relationship is done, right? The relationship is done. So the focus should be on co-parenting, but as you know, in a lot of cases, the focus becomes on finding out information about the other person, right? Making things difficult for the other person, right? Making the other person's life difficult. So just in those 3 points, the child's well-being is fourth.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think winning is a problem. People want to win. You know what I mean? They want to win. So again, it's lumped into personal problems.
Absolutely. All right. Invalidating your kid's emotions by ignoring it or shutting them down. Yeah, this is, I think, and what I've observed is that it's the intention part that we spoke about earlier. I think some of the old phrases of, oh, what's wrong with you? Oh, you're feeling sad, or you're depressed. You wouldn't be depressed if you went and cleaned your room, right? You wouldn't be like I think some of the statements and some of the phrases that I've heard, right? And see, listen, this is real, bro.
Yo,
this is real.
I ain't never heard that in my life.
Yo, man, listen. Or it's still like,
that's crazy, bro.
Listen, I've heard it, and it's a thing where also, like, you minimize.
You wouldn't be depressed if you went and mowed this lawn.
Yeah, you mowed this lawn. Or how about this one, right? It's the statement of, what do you have to be sad about, or what are you stressed out about? You ain't paying no bills, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that gets passed down because as parents, we forget that just because they're not paying bills, they're not working, or things like, and it's not these, you got to support the household things. Like, kids have important things going on in their life, but we don't deem it as important because it's not like life altering, or it's not going to affect the family and survival and things. But when statements like that are made, it's invalidation, right? A kid, or whatever age that they are, whatever's going on in their life is important. And if they come to you and say, hey, this is happening, or this happened at school, you'll be fine. Just go ahead and do this, right? So that's the invalidating an aspect that I've seen, or kind of just shutting them down before they get an opportunity to even verbalize what's going on, can be invalidating. They can feel like they're not heard.
I mean, this is going to sound insensitive, but to me, when this occurs, it's directly on the parents, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the parents' own emotional regulation skills and whether or not they have a trauma history. You know what I mean? Because if you're a parent, and you can't, this is what directly leads to us having a steady flood of teenagers in our office, right? Right. So I'm a little harsh when it comes to this because, again, like you gotta, the things that it's a very simple concept, right? Kids are not adults. It's that simple, right? So the things that bother adolescents and teenagers are not going to make sense in the mind of an adult. You know what I mean? A child is going to be upset to the point where they might be ready to harm themselves if they're excluded from a social group. An adult can pay to be included in a social group. Mm-hmm. You can go online and pay your way into a social club or this place or that place. So it's just different. A kid could be walking to school, with an outfit that they done planned on wearing for weeks, and get it dirty and be devastated. And parents don't understand that, right? A kid can have a breakup and be ready to end their life. Yep. Right? So teasing, these different things can make a child want to harm themselves. Right? It's not difficult to understand, but what it involves is there's a lack of insight by the adults, because what it involves in is people seeing things from another perspective, because they understand, they just won't accept it, because they were all adolescents at one point. And if you ask them to write about their experiences in high school, let's take out the people that had to work to support their family, and all of that stuff. But they're going to be talking about the same things that their kids were talking about. Friends and girlfriends and, how they look and how they dress and all of those things. So again, I think when people get older, they lose sight, but it's lazy parenting, right? It's lazy parenting to look over the seat, and people may not like me saying this, and say, you ain't paying no bills. Why do you look so sad? That's just being lazy. That's being tired from work, wanting to go home and watch Netflix, and not wanting to say, listen, baby, let's stop and get some ice cream and talk, because something's not right. So it's lazy parenting. And again, I'm not saying every parent, but it's a direct reflection, I think, of their own emotional regulation, self-care, and possibly trauma.
Yeah, it's the lack of openness, because like you said, how many people or how many folks, teenagers, have come in, and one of the main things they say is that I can't talk to my mom, I can't talk to my dad. Like whenever I say something, they shut it down, or they don't listen. Right? If you don't have that openness, like you said, we all work, we go through tough days, but like you said, if it's that low frustration tolerance of when your kid is coming to you about whatever's going on in their life, and because it's not important on your radar, you just kind of minimize and invalidate it. So that's definitely that's an issue.
One thing I will add, though, and I want to be fair. Most parents, a majority of them love their kids immensely, right? Mm-hmm. So what I found is that it's a lack of, like I said, it's a lack of insight. But with most parents, as long as you approach them in the right way, if you talk to them about it, they're willing to change some things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because no parent wants their kid to just go down, unravel emotionally. So that's why I said a lot of times it is trauma. It is how they were raised. So I'm not just dumping on the parents. I think when you connect with them in the right way, right, they're willing to change, but that doesn't stop it from being an issue,
Yeah, it's a lot of unlearning, and a lot of it, like you said, due to how you were raised, your culture, and other different, things that exist. Getting mad for disrespect or talking back when the kids win an argument. Take me through that. What you think, Jack?
I mean, listen, this is how I grew up, my brother. Respect is a very important thing in my house, and it's a lot of elders, adults in my family where, listen, if you win an argument, you disrespectful. That's how you're gonna end up losing the argument. You understand?
You got to take that argument. You got to take that argument, that win, in silence.
Right. But again, I think it's another cultural thing, and it's about respect, power, and control. And it's one of those things where at a space and time, I think there was a mindset towards parenting that you had to be like a superhero, right? So every day got to be your best day. You can't never be wrong. You can't get down on a level with your kids, right? Mm-hmm. And if we look at how parenting is looked at now, it's almost the reverse, right? You know, what do people tell you when you want to connect with your child? What? Don't talk to them from up here. Get down on their level, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to know what's going on in your kid's life, ask them what's going on in their life, right? Another way of getting down on their level. So I think this is just another thing that has to do with power and control, is kind of directly connected to not apologizing, right? Because you're going to see this in the families and in the cultures, where there's that dominance, right? Where it's like, respect your uncle and your aunt, even if everything that they saying is some bullshit. You know what I mean? You better nod your head and act like they right, like that type of stuff, right? But we're getting away from that, right? Because we talk out of both sides of our mouth, because we want children to blindly obey and follow us in certain situations. And then others, we want them to make extremely difficult, calculated situations. So when you're in my house, I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm the adult. Shut up and do what I say, right? But, and this is where it gets serious, but if an adult in the park tells you to do something you're not supposed to do, disobey them, right? It's a very confusing message for children, and it's not cut and dry. I'm not saying that parents should just passively raise their children, but you want to raise them to think critically, and that's going to involve them challenging you at times, and you accepting responsibility for being wrong at times. And parents have issues with that, Yeah.
I think a big thing real quick that it comes down to the communication factor, right? So they're talking about disrespect or talking back. So it could be a culture thing, but that's never okay, right? Not in my household, not in a lot of households I know, right? Disrespect and talking back, that's not going to be tolerated. There's a difference between, having a conversation, you want to get your point across, right? You want to have space for you to have, your point that you're making. Personally, it's been a situation with my daughter where I'll give you the opportunity to say what you want to say, after I'm done talking. I'm going to give you that opportunity. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean of what you say is going to change my decision, but I will hear you out. And I think that's the big difference between a lot of situations that take place, is that kids feel like they're not being heard, right? Like you said, my house, my rules, I'm going to say what goes. I don't care what you have to say, right? So you're instantly shutting them down. So yeah, you're definitely not going to talk back to me. You're definitely not going to, disrespect me. I'll give you that opportunity to say what you're saying from your perspective, because like you said, the insight comes in. Maybe I'm missing something, I'm not recognizing some part. And I'll take that in consideration as far as whatever the situation may be. But I think when you just shut it down, it really does come to the communication aspect of it, where the talking back and disrespect and yelling and shouting, and then everything just gets lost in the meanwhile, So
I mean, yeah, man, because how you communicate is going to depend on like what kind of environment you set up from the beginning. So if you set up the type of environment in your home from the beginning, where when you have an issue, you sit down and talk about it, then you're not going to be in a situation where you're getting mad for disrespect. Exactly. Unless you're just mad at what your child has to say. And that's a personal thing. You know what I mean? That's another issue. Like if you raise critical thinkers, you can't get upset at them for thinking critically. You know what I mean? But again, it comes down to power and control. And I don't think, I want to be very clear with what I'm saying. I think most parents have good intentions, right? Because they're saying, if you would ask a parent why, the root of why they were doing that, they're either going to say, that's how I was raised, or I want to raise them with respect or something like that. You know what I mean? But I don't think, some of the underlying messages that are being sent, I don't really think some people see immediately.
All right. Saying that a kid has a boyfriend or girlfriend anytime they are close with friends with a child who isn't the same gender. What do you think about that?
I mean, and I ain't really got much to say about that. That's kind of, I mean, it depends on the age. I understand the point they were making. I don't know. I mean, listen, man, like I've been, sometimes you're around first, second graders, and I've never really heard parents saying that directly to the kids,
Yeah.
to children. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I think that was kind of just thrown in there, man. I ain't really got too much to say about that.
Yeah, I only thing I can say to that is, again, like, I guess it depends on the age. I don't think you should automatically jump to that conclusion. I feel like as a parent, you want to be aware if you're noticing, okay, your kids of a certain age, if they get older, they're around an opposite gender friend, you know, say, all right, okay, you know, just be aware of it. But I don't think you jump to that conclusion and be like, oh, that's your boyfriend and things. You can ask, you can inquire, but I feel like jumping to that conclusion is, you know, but like you said, I don't know. I think they were kind of reaching on that one.
Yeah.
Gaslighting their children into believing things that are simply not true in order to defend themselves.
I got nothing to say about that either. That's ignorant, and it's just ignorant. Like, it's ignorant.
That's as toxic as it comes right there.
What am I supposed to say about that? I mean, that's
that's self-explanatory. So, you can tell me and I won't be mad, followed by punishing them for whatever they admit. Then you wonder why the kids never talk to them. All right.
I mean, listen, this is the best way to ruin trust that you've established with your children, right? And it happens all the time. It's just on a larger level, you got to understand, like, children see the hypocrisy every day, right? They study their caregivers. They know their caregivers like the back of their hand, right? So when you tell them that, tell them, oh, you can tell me something, I won't get mad, and then you do. I mean, you only got to do that 1 or 2 times to teach them to go to their friends or go to somebody else. And I just think on a larger level, I think sometimes parents think they're smarter than kids, right? And 6-year-olds see the hypocrisy. So if you have a 6-year-old and you tell them, like, listen, cigarettes are bad, right? Then the kid comes in your office or my office and they be like, yeah, daddy sits out on the back stairs and smokes cigarettes every day after work, but he says they're bad.
Yeah, he says they're bad, but I see him out there with his Lucy and everything, and, you know, like.
Right. So, and you can, and now in front of you, if you ask him, oh, should you smoke cigarettes? And I'm like, no, you know what I'm saying? But that's going to be the kid where, the teacher's showing you pictures and he's drawing pictures of cigarettes in the mouth, right? Or he's rolling up when he's in school, he's rolling up the paper and he's daddy, right? We've seen this. Or he's telling me that, right? So I think it's just kind of an extension of that, right? It's like, as adults, sometimes we think we're so much smarter than kids, and we have more wisdom than them, but we're not necessarily smarter than them in terms of being sneaky.
I don't even know why you even use that disclaimer. Why even put that disclaimer out there? You can tell me and I won't get mad. No, why would you say that? You don't know what they're getting ready to tell you. So why even make that promise? Like, I've never, again, for me, I think my daughter maybe said that once or twice, like years ago. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to make that promise. You need to tell me what happened and we'll go from there. Like, why a parent would even make that? Because you have no idea what your kid is getting ready to tell you. And kids get into shit. Like, kids, they all kinds of things. There's varying degrees of what could go wrong or what they're telling you. So no, you don't. As a parent, I think that's one of the, like, worst things for you to say. I don't want to say worse, but, like, it's just not a good way for you to lead off. Like, if they come to you and say, hey, I got something to tell you. Oh, baby, you can tell me. I won't get mad. Like, no, tell me and we're going to resolve the issue. Okay, because you're allowed to have a reaction. You're going to have a reaction. It doesn't mean that the reaction or the anger that I'm having from what you tell me, that I'm not going to support you. We're not going to I might be angry at the moment, but we're still going to deal with the situation. If you're going to get some consequences or a punishment, that comes associated with it.
Right. I mean, I think you put it perfectly. Like, I can't even add nothing to that. A better way to put it, instead of tell me and I won't get mad, is tell me and I'll help you now. Tell me, and whatever it is, I will help you now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's because as a parent, you always got to give yourself leeway for consequences. If you don't, then you have just become your child's peer.
Yeah, like, no, you did something wrong. There's going to be consequences. That's how it works. It's more of a tell me what you did and we'll see what happens. That's how I'm gonna say. Taking away their privacy unless your kid has a serious drug or self-harming problems. Violating their privacy will almost certainly do more harm than good to their mental health and trust. What do you think?
I mean, I can only speak to this anecdotally, and all I will say is that all of the children that I grew up with, males and females, whose parents took doors off their bedrooms, went through their diaries, went through their phones. These was the kids that the minute you turned your back, they was doing everything, trying everything, down for everything. So parents can do that if they want, but when your kid gets to college or when they get to that keg party, like it was for me in high school, they're going to be the spectacle. So you can do that if you want. I mean, again, like with most things, the middle ground is the best way to go, right? Yeah. You want your child to have a certain degree of privacy. You want them to have, of course, you want them to have a box or something where they put their things and it's their corner and it's their room. I mean, you want them to have a certain amount of privacy. Now, if it infringes on safety, that's different. You understand? But if we're preparing children to be independent, then we have to start them off with some level of responsibility, which, directly related to a little bit of autonomy and privacy.
Yeah, it's balance that goes along with it. I think it's good to be aware of kind of some of the things that your kid is into, maybe kind of know who they're hanging around. I don't recommend the taking off the doors, spying on phones, because like you said, there's a certain amount of privacy that they need to have. Right? I've always looked at it where I don't necessarily want to know everything that my kid is doing, right? Safety, absolutely. Some of the people she's hanging around. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, like, I haven't peeked at, like, what my daughter, like, especially when she was going to, like, the later middle school and high school, because I would see, like, her text thread or something because we shared the account. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't, like, took a peek at it just to kind of see where it's at. But I also feel like some of the things that aren't really severe or major issues, you have to kind of be able to, like, all right, that kind of allow her to have her privacy or her autonomy, right? You can't be that judgmental parent and be like, oh, I saw this and why are you doing this? Like, kids are going to be kids. And if you go always looking through their privacy and looking like in their journal or whatever the situation may be, eventually you're going to find something that you don't like, right? That confirmation bias is going to take place and you're going to find something that you don't approve of. But like you said, you got to it's really healthy for you to give them that space. So when they do get freedom, they don't wild out. Right? They've been able to experience life and other different things, because not, like you said, you're going to see those situations go terribly extreme and go wrong.
Oh man, listen, anecdotally, of course, like I grew up with a lot of people that it's like when they got their first taste of freedom, man, they lost their mind, and that I can directly kind of trace that back, knowing them, to like, the some of those strict environments that they was in, they end up doing some of the most extreme things because, again, part of it is just the natural wanting to kind of, experiment, but I think also it's like, I'm trying to think of for lack of a better term, it's like trying to catch up, you know what I mean? Like, you see these kids who, like, it's kind of like your first week of college, right? You kind of can tell the kids who kind of been on their own for a little bit, they kind of got a little bit more control. And then you look around and it's the kids that are a little bit more anxious. They kind of looking for somebody else to lead, different things. And these are kind of the skills that we develop in with all of these little things that we doing. So I think privacy is important, like especially for kids that are in high school. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like it kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week with the photos, right? Like we don't give them enough responsibility or autonomy over what they're wearing. But in 6 months, they got to decide everything. You know what I mean? And that means privacy too, right? They got to decide who they're going to let in their house, who they're going to not let in their house, who they're going to give a ride to, not give a ride to. Mm-hmm. But 6 months before, dad or mom was reading my diary. It just doesn't it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not advocating passive parenting, but what I'm saying is the middle ground is often the best way. You know what I mean?
All right, less of a parenting tactic and more of a tactic parents use. So contriving a video featuring their kid to post to social media.
I'm gonna be very honest with you. I know this is crazy. I didn't even really know what that meant. Like, are they talking about just like putting together a video of your kid and putting it on Instagram? Or
I think so. Yeah.
that's above my level of intelligence, Dr. Kyle. So
I mean, for me, I can speak to me. Like, I don't post that much on my social media thing about my kid outside of like her accomplishment of like getting into school and like when I visited her up there at school. Other than that, like I've never really been a huge subscriber of like putting the kid, recording and posting it. Like, I mean, for me, I'm a little bit more private as far as that goes. So, but I mean, I think again, balance with that. I don't think you should, use your kid as like, you know, like as a novelty or kind of like, I get it. You're proud of your kids and you love them. You want to showcase things. I do feel like people should be a little bit more selective just because it's social media. And once it's out, it's out. Right. And people make judgments. People make all types of criticism and things. And so I would just err on the side of caution as far as how much you do. But I mean, I get it. Like, kids are amazing. Like they're one of the best gifts that you can have. And a lot of people want to showcase, going with the family and your kids and different things. But just be careful because there's also the dark side of that is that you got some really, some sick individuals out there that aren't, don't have those same intentions. So I would just be, really careful sometimes the way how much the volume and frequency in which people do it sometimes.
I mean, I agree, like if you're posting pictures of your kid to your closed Facebook group, your private Instagram page, that's fine. Tinder, not good. No. Right. So I think you just gotta watch, one, because of what you said, because once you put stuff on the internet, it's out there. And then you have to really be careful because, you have people who, they compile pictures of kids, I mean, of course, of children, and they have sick people out here, right? So you want to be careful because of that too. But in general, again, I thought that was kind of a throw and I didn't really understand why they put it there. Posting pictures of your children, I mean, I don't see it as long as it's done responsibly, I don't really see it as bad.
Yeah. Using humiliation or an embarrassment as punishment.
I mean, come on. I guess this is 101 as how your kid can end up in one of our offices, right?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, man, children already have fragile self-esteem, all these things are being built, self-concept, self-efficacy, all of those things. So as a parent, if you want to destroy that and you think that that's building character, it's doing the exact opposite, right? Mm-hmm. So what you may end up getting is, okay, you're going to get a very subservient, obedient child in the house, right? And outside of the house, they may either be internally focused or they may just be bullying other kids and be aggressive, right?
Yeah. That's
but it's gonna come out somehow, right? They're gonna get some get back somehow, for lack of a better term, But on a serious note, it's irresponsible, and I think it comes back to lazy parenting, right? Because that's usually gonna come down to somebody who was parented through the same type of had the same type of traumatic experiences in terms of demeaning comments, and it's lazy because you're not taking the time to either find out what's going on or put in an appropriate intervention to alter the behavior. It's easy to call your kid stupid. That's easy. The hard thing to do, okay, is to modify those behaviors over and over again. That's the hard thing to do. So again, I'm going to take another approach because I think even parents that do that, the intent isn't to have their child end up with anxiety disorder or depression, right? Or low self-esteem. if you talk to them, they're probably going to say, I want them to be strong. I want them to be respectful. I want them to be responsible. Right. But the long-term impact, can be drastic.
I believe when parents go the embarrassment route as a punishment, you have a high probability of your kid resenting you. Resentment's a big key because these kids don't forget. And depending on what the embarrassment entails, if they're recording it and it's in front of people, they don't forget. I mean, you got to think about when we've been embarrassed. Do you forget those times? You don't. You rarely forget the time that you were embarrassed in school in front of your friends or whatever the situation may be. And if you think that, oh, I'm going to embarrass them and it's going to be a deterrent, like they'll never do this again. No, you're going to have a whole nother host of issues on your hand with this kid. And resentment will be one of them because think about it. That's big. That is one of the most important things in any kid's or teenager's life is the social component.
It's a fact.
You skew that, you damage that, that's going to be pretty hard to come back from. So I don't recommend any parent go that route, at least not intentionally. If something happens unintentionally and that's different, and I feel like a parent definitely needs to recognize that and have a conversation with the kid to know that it wasn't intentional. But if it's done in that type of manner, I don't recommend any parent goes that way. That's not going to yield. Man. It's not going to yield the results that you want.
Yeah. Man.
All right. Being overly protective. So if the statement that follows this one is if you don't let your kids fail or protect them too much, they'll be less capable of doing so when they've left home and so on and so forth. For me, it's balance. Like you have to be protective to a certain extent. And there's going to be circumstances and situations where you have to let them kind of experience things. So it's like you said, right in the middle, it's a balance component with that.
I mean, all I would say about that is it's kind of revisiting a lot of the things we talked about. The middle ground is the best way to go, right? So, if you're overprotective of your children, that's going to have negative effects. And if you're overly passive with them, depending on their personalities, it may have, negative effects too. The best thing to me is kind of like, the middle ground, right? Kids need structure, but they also need to be able to explore their environment, freely. It sounds contradictory, but it's not, it's the difference between being able to walk around, the kitchen, but there's a rule that you can't touch the stove, right? Structure, but being able to explore the environment. And that's what kids need, that balance. However you apply it, they need that balance.
Overly accommodating and praising children. What do you think about that?
I mean, the only way this could be negative is if you're not criticized. So,
right. Yeah, but with this,
I don't know why they included that unless you're just talking about somebody who's just treating a kid like they're just like a king or something, and they could do nothing wrong.
Yeah, I feel like I believe this to be like kind of a throw-in, and I guess it's kind of more along the lines of the overprotective and over. I don't know. Like kids don't get enough praise, in my opinion, right? Because they're gonna remember when you don't praise them, when you're critical of them, that a lot of times they remember that more than 10 or 15 times that you've praised them, right? That one or two times that you didn't praise them or that you were critical of them, that's gonna stand out to them. So I've always been, a subscriber that, you praising them and accommodating them, even when they're not doing anything, is a key ingredient, right? To helping them build their self-esteem. Of course, being realistic with them in certain situations is also helpful and healthy. However, like praising children and accommodating them and supporting them, I feel like you can't go wrong with that.
I mean, that's why I don't understand. Like this whole, parenting programs that are based around praise, So I don't get it. I mean, we sit around, we tell parents, catch them doing good, right? Catch kids being good, right? Instead of focusing on the bad behavior, catch them doing something positive, right? And that's kind of, what that is. So I only think it's a problem if you're not, holding them accountable in terms of structure and constructive criticism. That's it.
Yeah. Making your female children change clothes when male family members come over.
Listen, I'm gonna be very honest. We can skip over that one because I didn't even pay attention to it. I don't even know what that means. I've never seen anything about that. I have nothing to really say about that. I don't understand the reason. So you can comment on it, but I got nothing to say about that.
Nah, I'm a forego that one also. Outside of like your kid wearing something inappropriate or underwear, I don't know. Having kids before you've gone to therapy to address your own childhood trauma.
Now, this is something that's not practical, but I think it's something that could be beneficial. So I'll just leave it at that. It's just like marriage counseling, right? I think it could benefit every couple, right? I don't think there's a parent alive that probably couldn't benefit from, even though parenting is an on-the-job kind of thing, talking to another parent, getting some information before you go through the experience. I can't see how that's a bad thing. And reflecting on undoing some of the maybe the maladaptive parenting methods that you might have learned by modeling your parents, right? Which is true probably for all of us in one way or another. So I don't see how it could be bad, but I don't think it's practical at all.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the practicality, like it's helpful to go to therapy to help you with that. But like you said, it's not very practical. Saying anything along the lines of just be happy. Like, I guess in the context, we'll say like, thanks, my depression is cured. So I looked at this as kind of the invalidating, whereas just like if someone tells you, if your kid says, hey, I'm not feeling good, or I'm depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, well, don't be depressed, just be happy, right? Along those lines. So I put that in the same category as the invalidating emotions and struggles. That's where I put that one at.
I mean, I got nothing to add to that. To me, it's just being lazy. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're saying that, you might as well just say shut up, right?
Yeah.
And it's lazy parenting, right? Because some parents will never react that way, right? They're gonna, even if they say, I'll talk to you later when I get home, right? They're not gonna say, well, why are you depressed? Like, go fold some sheets. Like, it's lazy, man. And most likely it's reflective of either emotional regulation issues within that person or how they were parented, which might translate to trauma. So, I mean,
All right. And finally, the not explaining their decisions. So it's like do this because I'm your mom, I'm your dad, because I say so.
I mean, to me, this kind of goes with the not admitting when you're right. A lot of culture in this one too. But this is kind of more of a chronic kind of thing because, I mean, listen, as old as I am, I still have that same kind of, I still have some of those same confrontations with my older family members. Not confrontations.
I know what you mean.
Right. So, listen, seniority is seniority, and I always, I kind of, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because when you do it to kids, it sends them mixed messages, right? Especially when they know you're clearly wrong, and when you know you're clearly wrong, right? As an adult, I can deal with it a lot better, right? Because I'm looking at it in a different context. I'm looking at it in context of just, all right, I'll give this person their respect, and then I go back to whatever my own. But in terms of parenting, it's going to be a negative effect, right? Because because you're teaching your child to avoid responsibility, right? That they don't have to justify their decisions, right? Those type of things, and the world doesn't necessarily work like that, and you're not going to necessarily get the result you want.
Yeah, this is more that kind of that dictatorship type style of parody where, it goes back to communication. it goes back to, again, not saying that you have to check with your kid and you know, and make those, you know, clear decisions with them, but communication key, you know, goes a long way. So that's where I'm at with that.
Ah, man, I agree.
You know,
I can't disagree at all.
you know, another episode in the books. Dr. J, anything you want to, you know, put out there, a highlight before we get out of here?
No, again, we just want to, you know, thank everybody for subscribing, listening. Please continue to subscribe, share. We really appreciate it. Humbled by the support. And we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. So appreciate the support, guys. Shout out Dr. J. You and I were talking about this off air. Shout out to the Patterson family. They supplied your boy with the shirt. ZW.
Definitely.
Make sure I'm getting that right. Hold on. Right there. They are absolutely the Patterson family, HBCU alums, Hampton and Spelman. So shout out to them. We'll definitely be rocking more of their wardrobe because they're doing good things and they make good products. So, but thank you, everyone. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate the love. And we will see everybody next week. Don't forget, email your questions, the Black Psychologist at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation.
All right, bro.
I'm going to get at you.
No doubt.